Welcome to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by Lucas Oil, TireRack.com, and RockAuto.com. Here's your MotorWeek podcast host, John Davis.
Thank you, Alec Webb, and welcome everyone to MotorWeek podcast number 263. I am John Davis, and joining me today, our senior executive producer, Dave Scribner.
Hello.
Our writer, two-wheel and reporter, Brian Robinson.
Happy to be here, sir.
And our over-the-edge reporter, Greg Carlos.
Hey.
And welcome to all of you. We've got a lot to cover, and that includes the just completed 2021 Munich Auto Show, or Munich Motor Show, whatever you want to call it these days. We'll get into that in a second. The 2021 Jeep Wrangler 4xe we're going to talk about that led off our new series. 2022 Porsche 911 GT3. And we've got a little bit of Goss's Garage talking about the long-lost Maxton that is highlighted as we begin our 41st season on the air. We've got a lightning round. We've got a YouTube question. We'll see if anybody's got a rant and rave. But let me start. People might say, well, we've never really heard in this country of the Munich Auto Show anymore. And that's why, because every 2 years we would all traipse off to the Frankfurt Auto Show, which was also known as the IAA, and now it's called the IAA Mobility. Basically, they've moved Germany and Europe's biggest auto show that happens once every 2 years from Frankfurt to Munich because of declining interest in Frankfurt. And this was the first year, and I'm not so sure that even here it has lived up to anything close to past hype. It basically ended up being a showcase mostly for the German brands. And for that matter, and maybe that's no surprise to everyone, most of the new vehicles shown there were electrified and in many cases all electric. So I'm kind of going to run down a laundry list of what was new there. And everybody can chime in once I've done to either ask questions or maybe add something that I overlooked. We'll start with Mercedes-Benz. They've easily had the most new stuff there. Their highlight was something called the EQE. Now, EQ is Mercedes' electrified sub-brand. This is an electric sedan that's very much akin to the E-Class. It is designated to make it to the U.S. eventually. They're probably talking about a around 300 mile range when it gets here. It will also offer an all-wheel drive version. It's smaller than the EQS sedan they showed before, but larger than the EQC, their small all-electric crossover. And speaking of the EQS, they also showed an EQS SUV concept. They showed an EQG, which is an all-electric version of the G-Wagon. This was a concept, but it really did basically register with a lot of people. And one of the few non-all-electric vehicles shown at the show was something called, and we probably won't get it here, the E-Class All-Terrain, basically C-Class All-Terrain, a raised C-Class wagon. And it was actually pretty interesting. It looked a lot tougher than any Mercedes wagon we've ever seen before. Over at rival BMW, they had a variety of vehicles, but the one that really captured everybody's attention was a concept, and it's a pretty unusual concept. It's called the iVision Circular. The circular sort of lends to its egg-like shape. It's a fully recyclable, 100% recyclable city car. Of course, all electric. They also showed a couple of vehicles in Europe that we've already seen in China, the iX SUV and i4 sedan, all electric, and a new one, the i5 hydrogen, based on the 5 Series sedan. VW also went the concept route with the ID Life concept, their electric city car. Pretty interesting vehicle. Looks like it's headed for production. We saw the second of the new concepts of 3 concepts from Audi. They already showed the Sky Sphere at Pebble Beach, and this was the Grand Sphere they showed in Munich, a much larger vehicle, a beautiful looking sedan to give you an idea of not only where they're going in styling, but also as autonomous driving starts to take hold, what their vision is there. Speaking of vision, Mini, even though it's a British brand, it's owned by BMW, they showed something that's very unusual for them, the Vision Urban Aught, which by any other definition, it's a small minivan concept and the largest vehicle they've ever made. This is just a concept now, but it looks like it's headed for production. It's going to probably be built in China, along with another Chinese-built vehicle, perhaps the Smart Concept 1, which is actually about the size of a Mini Countryman, the largest vehicle Smart's ever built. Smart's not sold here anymore. It's doubtful they'll return, but they are still alive in other parts of the world. And finally, on my laundry list, a vehicle they kept completely under wraps until they unveiled it, and I give them kudos for that. The Porsche Mission R, a fully sustainable EV race car. Pretty cool looking machine. But that's kind of like my rundown of what I saw in all the news reports and from Munich. And my impression is, for an all-electric vehicle show, it wasn't bad, but for a global car show, I just wonder how much there was that was shown there was really relatable to us here in the US, certainly less than what we used to come out of Frankfurt with. But I think it says a lot about where at least the industry globally is heading and what car shows are heading to be. So any comments or anything else about anything we saw there?
Yeah, I feel like it's the show kind of missed its mark probably with most of car enthusiasts, because a lot of it is like a concept. Some of it was completely autonomous. There's not a lot of emotion with these, at least from where I sit, these electric cars. You could argue for Porsche, the Mission R is pretty cool because that's similar to like a Cayman sized customer race car. Porsche's big with selling customer race cars. So that definitely piqued my interest. But performance wise, we did get a little bit. Mercedes AMG, they have the EQS will get AMG treatment, so 751 horsepower. If you go to the top, they have two levels of the AMG. If you go to the top one, 751 horsepower. And then Hyundai, a little bit different approach. They're sticking with hydrogen, or at least, still trying to push hydrogen. They have a hydrogen fueled sports car. I think the Concept FK is what they're calling it. And it actually is a bit of a hybrid, but a fuel cell hybrid. So it has a fuel cell up front powering the front axle, and then a battery powered rear motor powering the rear axle. So that's kind of cool. Definitely some, hydrogen is still making a push. So I don't think that's totally gone yet. And in some ways, I think it's kind of gained steam the last few years.
I think
it's drive it without hydrogen.
Pardon?
I wonder if you can drive it without hydrogen and just do the battery part.
I don't know. As we found with a lot of hybrids, if the battery goes down or the electric source goes down, you're dead. I'm glad you brought up, Greg, Hyundai, because they did make a big announcement. They laid out a very extensive hydrogen future for the brand. And again, you wonder how much of that will ever be practical here, except maybe in California. Mr. Robinson, we haven't heard anything from you.
Yeah, I still have a hard time wrapping my not very smart brain around how we're going to charge all these electric vehicles that everyone says they're exclusively going to make in the coming years. But of any brand, Mercedes makes me a believer. They just seem to have really good plans and also really good real vehicles. So I think they give me hope. The iVision circular concept, I think the circular comes from the recyclable nature of how they look at their brand, which to me, that's the last thing you want to hear on a car, that it's just recyclable. I want a car that, I can hold on to and cherish for a long time. I
was referring to, if you look at the shape, it is kind of a circular shape, but you're absolutely right. It's supposed to be from birth to death recyclable.
Yeah, I like the ID Life Volkswagen. That looked really cool. And but the minivan, that's definitely where it's at. I would buy it if it looked anything close to that in production version.
Are you kidding?
No, I love it. You don't like it? What's not to like?
I'm going to save my pennies for the Audi Grand Sphere. I love that styling direction. It's the best looking of the huge grills that I've seen.
You're right. Good.
The sculpted sides, and if that's their direction, I applaud it for styling.
It definitely had that long, low, wide, unbelievable look to it that, well, we used to say we're only show cars, but we've seen quite a few in recent years. It was, I think you would have to say it was the most attractive vehicle that they showed. Anybody showed?
Definitely.
Well, so Munich, I don't know, the future of the auto shows in Europe, we'll see. Paris is next year. We'll see what happens there. I wonder though, if we can all get as excited about all of these EVs as we have in the past about internal combustion engine vehicles. Maybe it's just my age, but right now I find many of them less than exciting. So we'll see. Let's move on. And actually, we're going to talk about an electrified vehicle, possibly the last one that a lot of us thought would ever get electrification. And we led off the first show in our 41st season with it, the 2021 Jeep Wrangler 4xe. And this is a plug-in hybrid. So besides the fact it looks and drives pretty much like most other Wranglers, what did we think about it?
Yeah, there's no point belaboring what it looks like. Everyone knows what the Wrangler looks like by now. Pretty much the same since it has since World War II, just bigger and 4 doors now, hardtop. The biggest difference is obviously the tech behind it. There's a huge charge port on the driver's side of the A pillar now, which is used to charge the 17 kilowatt hour battery pack, which is under the rear seat. That starts off with the 2-liter turbo 4 engine, and then a pair of electric motors added to it for 375 horsepower, which is pretty stout in a Wrangler, despite how big it's gotten. And you can choose when to deploy the EV range, which is a nice feature. 22 miles of it is what you get. So you can save it for the trail and tread more lightly than ever. It is only available in the 4-door unlimited body style, and one of the motors is integrated into the automatic transmission, so no manual available. But they also do still sell a diesel version of the Wrangler as well. Our mileage loop was better with the plug-in than it was in the diesel, so keep that in mind. Driving any Jeep with no engine noise is certainly a bizarre experience, but it's certainly not a quiet one either, because everything else is still noisy. So you still get the full Wrangler experience. Maybe the biggest deal is that it's still crazy capable. You still get 2-speed transfer case standard, 4-wheel drive, and that electric torque. So you can even get a Rubicon version. And that electric torque certainly helps in off-road situations. Scrib, you drove it a lot more off-road than me. Maybe you can weigh in more on that.
Yeah, I did all the off-road driving for our shots, and did it all in EV mode. And we drove around mostly through the woods and some mud and open fields and things like that. And we did it for several hours, all in battery range, and didn't use up all the battery. I had wished we had gotten a little more aggressive tire package. We had a Sahara Unlimited, I believe, just more of a medium range tire for off-roading. And the mud gave it some problems.
But you didn't get stuck.
Can I say that? Oh, I got buried, John.
Did you really?
I got pulled out by a tractor, but it was the tire's fault and driver's fault, whatever. It looked
truth be told.
It looked like terra firma, but it was mud. It's hung up and high centered itself, but very capable off-road generally. The transfer cases and things and all the electric doodads you had to get you unstuck. It would have worked. I got pretty deeply in, so more than I'd planned to, let's say.
More than you planned to, definitely. Greg?
Yeah, I didn't get to take it off road. Didn't get stuck, unfortunately.
Fortunately.
So yeah, you know what? I'm not a huge Jeep guy. Guess I never understood the Jeep thing. But as believe it or not, I think the 4xe is probably as close as I've come, because I really enjoyed driving around on full electric. And I kind of live in a very hybrid country city setting, so I'm able to be downtown in my undisclosed location pretty quickly, or on the back roads. And I thoroughly enjoyed the semi-silent driving. Unless you really, really goose it, You pretty much just stay on that all electric powertrain, or part of the powertrain the whole time. But yeah, like I said, it's just not a typical Jeep Wrangler experience when you're in all electric mode. But I think I kind of like that better.
Well, let's go ahead, Dave.
It
Sorry.
was fun driving through the woods in EV mode and hearing, just kind of being at one with nature, so to speak, and you could kind of enjoy your surroundings more, I think.
Well, this is interesting considering just the conversation we just had a few moments ago about maybe the lack of excitement at the Munich Auto Show. Now, here's a vehicle that traditionally is one of the loudest, crudest things on the road. And at least two of the three of you, and if maybe it's all three of you, have just said how much you enjoyed the fact that electricity, and even were excited about the fact that the electric aspect of the 4xe made it better in your minds. Am I right?
In that situation, yeah, absolutely.
I thought your comment, Dave, about enjoying, just being out with nature without necessarily all the exhaust rumble, a very interesting one. So,
22 miles off road is a long line if you're on some decent trail. That's a long trip. It's not just a 5-minute thing. It's a couple hours at least.
I do worry a little that it's easily the most complicated Wrangler ever built. And we understand that some people bought them not because of the car shortage going on, didn't even know they were buying a plug-in hybrid. But kudos to Stellantis for going that route. So, okay, another vehicle that led off our 41st season, the 2022 Porsche 911 GT3. Greg, would you like to take us through that?
Sure. I just mentioned I'm not a big Jeep guy. I am a big Porsche guy, though, so I enjoy all the noises that come along with all 911s. This one in particular, the GT3, just a refresher. You have the 911 Carreras, which are your street going ones that can certainly handle the track, but GT, when you see those two letters, that's specifically for track work. I mean, they are street legal, of course, but I mean, they are built to really take or to take on a track. So if you're a big horsepower improvement fan with new models, you're probably going to be disappointed because there's, I think, like 2 more horsepower compared to the last GT3. It's 502 horsepower, which, that's not a little amount of horsepower by any means. But when you're now talking about 600 and even 700 horsepower is pretty common amongst high performance cars. It can kind of get lost in the fray, but it doesn't hold it back at all on the track. We took it to Summit Point, both Dave and I, and I'm sure he'll chime in on this one. It was probably a little bit too big for the track we had it on. It was on Shenandoah, so we couldn't really open it up a whole lot. But you still get around the course so quickly. And naturally aspirated 4-liter. They still haven't gone turbocharged with the GT3. They're going to stick with the naturally aspirated 6-cylinder. Sounds phenomenal. Dave, that sounds like a nice point for you to jump in and talk about how you felt on the track with it.
Naturally aspirated, I especially on a track, I prefer the naturally aspirated engine for more predictability on the power delivery. And this revving that thing to, was it 9,000 RPM? It's just phenomenal. We did one ski jump they have on that course. We got airborne several times at 135 miles an hour or so. And it always lands composed and ready for the next turn and never puts a tire wrong. It really it makes everything so easy to do because the car is so capable. It goes where you want it to go, and there's always room in reserve for when your bravery runs out. There's still some car left to reel you in back to sanity, as it were. But phenomenal car to drive, as always, with Porsches.
Yeah, they switched up the front suspension for the first time in a production 911. They have a double wishbone front, which is straight out of the race car. Most of this car is straight out of their race cars, minus the exhaust. Obviously, you have to have a different exhaust than a race car on a street. This was the first time that I didn't go straight to Sport Plus, their firmest suspension setting, because we did have one of their techs there. And judging by the conditions of the track, we actually I kept it in a softer setting, which for most of it was more rewarding. It didn't jump around as much. there were some corners that you felt like if you had the skill to be able to switch it back and forth mid, lap, that would be ideal. But it's, if you've never done track work with an adaptive suspension, just know you don't always have to go into the stiffest suspension. It's not always the answer.
Right. I agree.
Mr. Robinson.
Yeah, and not only is an adaptive with all kinds of different modes, you can go into the modes and tweak them. You can even manually adjust the suspension if you know what you're doing there. So tons of adjustment. That front suspension just gives all the feedback and direct feel of the road in the world that you could want in a car. Engine's perfection, which they've already touched on. I didn't get to drive it on the track. I have driven plenty, spent more time in the GT3 with the touring package, which, despite all of the track race car stuff they keep putting into it, it's still a totally comfortable, streetable car that you could drive every day if you wanted to. And the touring package, even more so. Just if you got the bucks, I would absolutely recommend buying it.
And that right there, gentlemen, is the reason so many of our MotorWeek fans think we have the best jobs in the world. To be able to drive something like a 911 GT3 on a racetrack at triple digits and do it and still get paid for it.
Still own a house. Yeah.
All right. Speaking of beginning of our new season, we did something else to start off the new season. We actually, thanks to Dave Scribner, found a long lost gem, something that dates back decades. And we surprised Pat Goss with it. And Dave, why don't you fill us in? What was it? What happened? Where'd you find it? And what are we going to do with it?
It's the Maxton roller skate, which is a component car that we built in 1991 and gave away in a contest. We got like 900,000 postcards and pulled one. The guy who won it was in Long Key, Florida.
I remember going down there.
Craig and Pat and I towed it down there in our Suburban and gave it away to the guy. He didn't drive a stick shift. His wife won him the contest, and he kept the car for a year or two and sold it to a friend of the show's, Mike Whitfield, back in Owings Mill. So it made its way back up to Baltimore. And Michael, unfortunately, passed away recently. And I spoke to his widow and asked if I could borrow the car to put in the Goss's garage set and surprise Pat with it on the first day of taping. That's what we did. But it had been sitting in his garage for 25 years, and I had to literally take the rear brake pads out so the car would roll. It was so frozen solid. The clutch is still stuck to the flywheel and it won't engage or disengage. But I got it. I replaced the fuel pumps and the fuel lines and got the thing to start up. And it sounds pretty wordy. Fun little car to drive. When I get a chance to do it, I'll certainly be first behind the wheel. But Pat looked it over and said there's some things we should address to get it back on the road, and we intend to. And I might actually end up buying it myself and keep it in the MotorWeek family if it all goes well.
Dave is becoming one of our resident historian of all things MotorWeek. So
I have Dave's oddball orphans car collection.
Yeah, I think that's very exciting. And I think as the season goes on, it's going to be fun to watch Pat tackle some of those issues and bring back a major chapter. I think that's really the only car we've ever built on the show. So.
Yes, it is. Yeah. And it's a Mazda 13B rotary engine, which is tough to find a Mazda rotary mechanic these days. But I found one actually close to where Greg lives. I'm going to advise with them about what to do to get it, up to spec again and tuning and running good. So stay tuned, and I'll keep at it and get it back in ship shape as soon as I can.
Terrific. Okay, we're going to move on now to our traditional lightning round. Let me read this one. Wallet Hub released its report on 2021's best and worst cities to drive in. The site compared the 100 largest cities across 30 key metrics. The data set ranges from average gas prices to annual hours and traffic congestion per auto commuter to auto repair shops per capita. Oakland, California was ranked last, and maybe that's not terribly surprising. It's a city with lots of congestion, and I might add an awful lot of electrified vehicles. while Raleigh, North Carolina, my home stomping grounds, actually took top honors. And I have to tell you that a lot of people who live in Raleigh might disagree with that. So anyway, what are the best and worst cities that we as a group and you as individuals have ever driven in?
It's no surprise that 4 of the worst cities are in California.
Yeah.
That list. And surprising that 3 of the top lists are in North Carolina and Florida. So yeah, just, I think geographically, the regions are more spread out down south and you have more room to roam.
And the cities are much smaller. I mean, we're talking about millions of people in the California metropolitan areas and far less than that around the Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill area.
Now,
How about you personally?
I gotta say, for the states, California is just, anywhere you go there can be a nightmare in a given minute. You know, I've driven across the state several times, and you know, even this year I went up there for a MotorWeek shoot, and some days it's great and sometimes it's not. But I don't relish driving across any city in California.
Any place that you found easier than expected?
I tend to avoid the cities on my road trips, and I've done quite a number of them in the last year. But I was surprised how, of course, it's a highway, but driving through the Ozarks was one of the best drives I've done in years. Just so much, the scenery and the rolling hills, and the traffic was light, and even the cities, you kind of skirted around them and it wasn't so bad, and you moved right through. So,
Brian, how about you?
Are we talking about like actual cities, downtown areas, or like including beltways and stuff like that?
I mean, like city surrounding areas.
Yeah. Well, why isn't Wallet Hub like a financial services thing? Why are they doing traffic thing?
Well,
I think everybody and their brothers into you know, they're looking for stuff to engage their fans with, and they all are branching out to a lot of stuff. And after all, staying stuck in traffic, as we've seen over the years, can be a major financial drain on an area in total.
Well,
so.
Anyway, LA is the absolute worst as far as sitting in traffic, as far as I'm concerned. But there is a payoff. I mean, once you get out of town and like out in the canyons, there's like amazing driving roads. Whereas like in New York, you can sit in traffic, but there's never any great reward for it other than just getting home. I will say, driving in New York City, actually one of the few people that love doing that. I actually went there not long after I started driving. I was in a cab and I asked the cab driver, like, what's the deal? How do you drive in New York City? And he's like, the best advice. He's like, the white lines on the road. He's like, don't pay any attention to them. If you can fit a car, then that's a lane. You can drive as fast as you want and do just about anything you want. Just don't run any red lights and you'll be good to go.
Greg.
Yeah, you know what? I'm kind of with Robinson on that one, because I think there's like an understanding amongst all the drivers there where like, yeah, they're like guidelines. I don't think anybody's really holding anybody to actual rules, but like it somehow works. Like it moves. It's like a living organism. So that's cool. But I'll stick up for LA as probably my favorite to drive in, because yeah, I know the traffic and everything, but the roads are so good that I can put up with all of that. And my worst is because I live near it, is DC, Northern Virginia, because basically like Robinson said about New York, the traffic is ridiculous. And I mean, LA has terrible traffic. I think DC, Northern Virginia rivals it. I mean, it's
number 92 on the list.
It's bad all the time. And there are really not a ton of great roads outside of it. I mean, it's so congested in DC and that Northern Virginia area.
I'm going to chime in with a city that I think is my tops for I hate to drive in. I actually don't mind. I kind of agree with you, Greg, about California, but Boston, I think, is the most car unfriendly city in America. And I think they're actually very proud of it. Between the streets and the tunnels and the bridges and everything else, very difficult to drive in. As far as the easiest city to drive in, I was surprised how easy I have a time getting around Nashville, Tennessee. It's a big metropolitan area, actually bigger than the New York metropolitan area. Yeah. But they've done a good job on highways and bypasses. And for a big city, a really big city or a big metropolitan area, I think it's pretty good. But Boston, fly in, take a boat, take a train, whatever you do, but just don't drive a car. Yeah, anything else?
Nope.
All right, we'll move on. We have a YouTube question from Cindy. When do you think the chip shortage will end? Looking at an Audi advertisement and the sales, talking to an Audi dealer, and the salesperson indicated it might not be until 2023. Is that true, or a way just to get the vehicles on their lot sold at a higher price? In the last few days, there have been several indications that we are indeed looking well into 22 and maybe into 23 before things get quote unquote back to normal. Anybody else have an impression?
All I have is anecdotal evidence, as a good friend of mine his job is very much to track this stuff, was like 2 years until we can get back on track. Wow. Probably. So take that for what it's worth. But I'll tell you this, it's not going to be soon. It's not going to be like this year.
Aren't there a couple of trucks that are half finished waiting for chips?
Yeah, everyone's waiting for chips, and some dealers, I deal with this almost on a weekly basis. Talking to a dealer today, they literally have 3 cars on their lot, 3 brand new cars, and you can come and drive one and then order one. You can't take any of those cars, buy them. They have literally no cars to sell. And he said they have no plans on getting in anytime soon unless you order it.
And
Wow.
this is having a trickle-down effect into the used car market. There's very few really good used cars out there because people aren't trading them in for new cars because they can't get them. I was by 2 big auto auctions up in the Harrisburg, Pennsylvania area last week. And what you see is either a lot of stuff that you really wouldn't want, or you see RVs, commercial vehicles, but what you don't see are 2- and 3-year-old passenger vehicles ready for sale. And when you drive by the lots, you're not going to see a lot of pickup trucks. You're not going to see a lot of large SUVs. You might see some sedans, but people don't generally want sedans. Or like we were talking about the 4xe for Wrangler, people are going into a Jeep dealer, they see a 4xe and they're a 4xe rather, and they're buying it sight unseen. They haven't driven it. They don't even know it's an electrified vehicle. All they think it is a Wrangler, and then they're getting home and finding out it's something different. So I'm not surprised that a salesperson is telling Cindy that it could be 2023, and I think that it probably will be, which is not good for anybody.
Yeah. Be prepared to pay a market adjustment or for the car over your sales price. I had a friend got to buy a Tucson. They were in the dealership and they were like, all right, great. Everything looks good. And then looked over the final paperwork and was like, oh, $5,000. What's this? I'm like, well, this is the money we add on because of it's hard to get cars right now. And the salesman was actually arguing. He was like, oh, well, it's not part of the price. And my friend's like, well, I'm paying it, right? He's like, yeah, but it's like, you think of it like a tax. Anyway, just if you go to buy a car, be prepared because there might be a little more money tacked on right before you sign the papers.
I really think it's a terrible time to be in the market for a car. So unless you've absolutely got to do it, don't, and be prepared to take, whatever they've got and maybe less than what you expect. I do think that we will see the situation ease by perhaps the end of the year and early into 2022. But it's clear from a lot of things besides just chips that the supply lines are not going to get back to normal for a while yet. And you're going to probably see it this Christmas. We're getting off subject here with electronics, TVs, kids' games, all of that stuff, because this chip shortage is affecting just about everything. Having said that, Cindy, I'm sorry we couldn't give you more encouraging advice, but thanks very much for sending in the question. And I think that pretty much wraps up our podcast number 263. Thanks, Dave, Brian, and Greg. Also want to thank Jim Bigwood, our audio engineer. our podcast producer, which is Greg, of course, and our podcast creator, Bob Mixter. And for all of you out there, MotorWeek is entering into its 41st season. We hope you'll catch us on the public television stations around the country. If you want to know where to catch MotorWeek, go to our motorweek.org website, click on About the Show up in the right-hand corner, put in your zip code. It'll list all of the stations in your area that carry us. You can also catch on PBS Living, streaming live streaming in complete episodes. And we have millions and millions of folks that go over to our youtube.com/MotorWeek channel every month and catch all of our segments. There's hundreds and hundreds of them on there, and we put new information up almost daily. I'm not sure if I left anything out. Social media is hot. Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. But until next time, to one and all, and from all of us, thanks for being a part of MotorWeek.
You've been listening to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by Lucas Oil, TireRack.com, and RockAuto.com. For additional information on podcasts, videos, and showtimes, visit our website at motorweek.org. And watch MotorWeek, television's longest-running automotive magazine series each week on your local PBS station.